All right, welcome back. This is presentation 3 of chapter 7 on the media. We're going to talk about some of the implications of the movement of the media to digital platforms and related issues. We're going to talk about other manifestations of the media. Radio is an increasingly popular political, platform for political venues, especially podcasts. Certainly in the 1990s, when Congress relaxed rules on the fairness doctrine, you saw the emergence of predominantly right-wing, what we used to call shock jocks, people like Rush Limbaugh, who became increasingly popular, offering basically, again, sort of right-wing, conservative, partisan takes on politics today. Right-wing talk radio continues to exert a considerable amount of influence. Most of the big names on Fox News in the evening, people like Sean Hannity, and Mark Levine, these folks also have radio programs that again are big draws. They draw big audiences. National Public Radio is a major source of in-depth, news and politics. It still is considered to be a fairly objective source for news. 67% of Americans report getting some, form of online radio programming for their news. So that, again, it remains a consequential source of news. Digital media, the significance of the internet on mass communications is similar in proportion to the rise of the penny press in the early 19th century. It's transformative. Younger Americans have moved decisively online as older Americans, continue to rely on TV and print and things like that. So again, streaming video is increasingly displacing cable as a source for news. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many politicians resorted to Zoom and streamed their town halls and recorded campaign videos to reach out to voters. News aggregators like Google News, Reddit, and Real Clear Politics are for some Americans a major source. And again, it's a way that they skim and scan what they're looking at, checking headlines and things like that. Digital citizenship, again, that refers to the ability of citizens to participate in politics online. In 2019, 73% of Americans were digital citizens, meaning they had both the means to high-speed internet access and the skills to interact as digital citizens. Economic inequality, and especially in the contrast between urban and rural areas, has produced what is known as a digital divide between those Americans, again, who have access to high-speed internet and those who lack access or who lack the means to access those things. The use of social media for news is growing across all demographic groups. And again, as I mentioned, while Obama was the first guy to actually use social media, Donald Trump was the first genuinely Twitter president for both good and ill. Citizen journalism, again, this is something where we talk about people, anyone that's got a cell phone can act as, on-the-spot journalists. Certainly that's what happened in Minneapolis, where a young woman, basically streamed or basically captured police killing George Floyd. Citizen journalists can both supplement professional journalism and correct factual errors in mainstream reporting. With sharply lowered technological and financial barriers, social media enables millions of Americans to reach a mass audience. So you're seeing the rise of social influencers, some of whom, again, have political leanings. The more fluid and freewheeling nature of social media influence journalism can have an erosive quality to traditional quality control approaches to professional journalism. The benefits and concerns, of course, the benefit is convenience, up to the minute currency of information, the depth of information available, the diversity of viewpoints, and the relatively modest cost. The concerns, obviously declining quality, the infiltration of fake news and misinformation, and the erosive effects on tolerance and people's, basic knowledge, basic understanding of politics. All these things are some things that we have to be aware of and be concerned about. Do Americans trust the media today? Just 20% of Americans express a great deal of trust in information from the national news organizations. Fully 29% of Americans have little to none, no trust in the national news organizations. And to some extent that reflects that, that close to, well, certainly more than a quarter of Americans have effectively walled themselves off from the mainstream media, and many of them only get their news from those sources they trust, which tend to be partisan in nature. So there are significant partisan differences in trust in the news media. Democrats are 23% more likely to view national news organizations as trustworthy. And to some extent, that is a reflection of the fact that Republicans and conservatives broadly have, going all the way back to the 1970s, argued that there is this liberal bias in the media. Which is, again, a contentious issue. I don't think that Republicans are entirely correct. So how do we go about evaluating a news source? This guy, Mike Caulfield, is a research scientist at the Center for Informed Public at the University of Washington, says, first of all, stop. Again, how do I know what I'm looking at? Number two, investigate the source. If the source is highly trusted, again, that's good enough. Number three, find better coverage. Look for other sources that can confirm or refute what you're reading. And then trace claims, quotes in the media back to, again, the original context. If there's a link, click through to the original story or the study. Do a fresh search with relevant keywords. Media scholars argue too many Americans give too much credence to one or a few media sources, and so they would ask you to follow the words of Ronald Reagan: trust but verify. In other words, Americans should approach all news outlets with a healthy amount of skepticism and do their homework. So how the media influences politics, again, with its agenda-setting power, the media can play a critical role in determining what stories are considered newsworthy. Political scientists have shown that the media have two modes: the alarm mode for breaking stories and the patrol mode for covering them in greater detail. Alarm mode coverage is often preferred because it conveys against that sense of alarm and immediacy that tends to draw more coverage. And remember, their economic incentives are to grab the largest audience share possible. So the alarm mode coverage also results in skewed coverage of political issues, where issues fitting into the alarm mode receive disproportionate amounts of coverage. Again, part of the problem with the news media's political coverage is its episodic nature. Each story is told as a separate and discrete event, replete with a brief description of the issue at hand, the introduction of some element of conflict, such as corruption, conflict or scandal, and a conclusion that seemingly ties up the story in a bow. This fits what media scholars describe as the storytelling imperative of most journalism. Journalists have enormous incentives to use narrative formats to tell an interesting story as a means of grabbing the maximum audience share. And that frequently results in what is known as decontextualization of anything in the story that doesn't fit the journalist's desired framing of the story. So again, the media's campaigns, their coverage of campaigns can kind of illustrate that problem, the sense in which they oftentimes will rely on this, what we call horse race coverage, right? Who is ahead? Who's behind? They get to act excited like, somebody who's calling a horse race without becoming the story themselves. And oftentimes that doesn't put voters in a good position to understand what it is that they're seeing, and where their interests lie, and which candidates are most likely to do the things that they actually want. So that's it for this presentation. When we come back, we will do one more presentation on the media and political information. I'll see you next time.